Think we're live? Yeah, there we go. Hello, Internet. It is time. It is time for us to review the thing that is one of the biggest letdowns, in my opinion, and that is the Ranger. The Ranger has been, well, it's been, as we discussed last night on one of the other live streams, something that WotC has recognized has had issues in the fact that they did 2 full Unearthed Arcanas almost dedicated entirely to fixing the Ranger, which you don't do that if you don't recognize that there's not a problem. There was the revised Ranger and the Ranger revised Unearthed Arcana in years past, 2 different attempts to completely revamp the Ranger, one of which I think is still hilarious that they gave them a 2d6 hit die as opposed to a d10, which I always thought was very interesting. Lots of different things taken and looked at to potentially change the Ranger, and it didn't end up getting to... they basically just scrapped those entirely and just continued to move forward with the Ranger as it was presented in 2014, though there were some changes in the errata. So that was a thing. I was a huge fan of the Ranger 3.5 and earlier editions. Loved the Ranger. Identified Ranger and Druid were 2 of my favorite classes. Obviously, they're very similar in nature-based. Me being a hunter, fisher, archer, naturey, woodsy guy when I was growing up was definitely a huge part of my life. I spent most weekends in the woods, whether that was hunting, doing shoots, or various different things. So I have a deep personal connection to this class, and it has just been really unfortunate, in my opinion, to see where things have gone. It is... If you saw the Unearthed Arcana for the Ranger in the various iterations that it was in, you're like, I can't wait to see how much they change. Well, don't get too excited, because things didn't really change that much. I'm looking up to see the last time the Ranger was touched in an Unearthed Arcana. Was it 7 or 6? Unearthed Arcana 6 was the last time we saw Ranger. It was one of the first ones done, alongside, they think, the Bard and the Rogue, and then they touched it again in Unearthed Arcana 6. So I will pull that up. I don't recall off the top of my head how much different it will be from the final version versus this one. So we'll take a look at it and kind of use that as an example to make adjustments where possible. So that being said, I'm not going to delay this too much longer. We are going to... you're not also going to see any drastic changes. I'll tell you that much. I went through this, with the playtest copy that I have, and took a look at this and went through it pretty extensively. And honestly, so many other classes can just do what... once again, so many other classes can do what the Ranger can do, but better, with just some, like, and better and more often, which has kind of been the name of the game for Ranger, in my opinion. Honestly, just take a nature-themed background and play a champion or a Battlemaster fighter. You're going to enjoy yourself. You're going to enjoy your time a little bit more. Now, art is still fantastic. I cannot argue with the art in any way. I love the art. I think it's fantastic. I can see kind of what they were attempting to go for. Gloom Stalker, in my opinion, is still the strongest option by and large, in like leaps and bounds. But yeah. So that being said, this is not a sitting down situation. We got to stand for this one. I'm going to have to get fully animated. There is just no way that I could take this sitting down. So this is definitely activate standing desk. Let's go. All right. It's time to unveil this video. Let's go ahead and make this full screen. Here we go, folks. The Ranger reveal video.
Today, we are talking about a very big topic. We are talking about the Ranger, and we effectively have a brand new class with this Ranger.
No, we don't.
Yeah, it is super exciting. The Ranger more than any other class in the new player's handbook, is a new class. People
Nope.
got to see the evolution of the class through the Unearthed Arcana process, and now in the new player's handbook, you will get the brand new Ranger.
That is such a lie. It is Tasha's Cauldron Ranger almost entirely with little to no changes.
And every facet of this class has been revisited, fine-tuned.
No, it hasn't.
The class has always been widely played, but
Unfortunately. Art, like I said, art phenomenal. Love the saber-toothed tiger aspect here. Very cool.
in our satisfaction surveys over the years, the class has also been one of our lowest rated classes. And so the Ranger, along with the Monk, received major overhauls.
The Monk, in fact, did receive major overhauls, and they did an excellent job. It's unfortunate that so many classes and different things that people thought had such a big, needed much work. Everything else got improved, in my opinion. Even the nerfs on the classes that got nerfs are still, in some degree, improvements to bring things more in line power-wise. The Ranger, once again, falls short.
In the new player's handbook, with again the Ranger receiving such a major overhaul that again it's a brand new class.
Yeah.
Should we dive in?
Yes, please.
Right away at first level, if you've played a Ranger over the past 10 years in 5th edition, you're going to see just how new it is, because everything at first level is new. So first off, you get your spellcasting now right away at first level. This is something we did in the Paladin as well in the new player's handbook. Spellcasting is a fundamental part of each of these classes' identities, and we no longer wanted these two classes to wait to get such a vital resource, partly because we also want people who are new to playing these classes to immediately get accustomed to integrating in the spell use that is a part of the hybrid nature of the Ranger and the Paladin.
Right.
These are the quintessential hybrid characters in D&D, going all the way back to 1st edition, that fuse weapon use with magic use. So spellcasting, it's at first level now for Rangers. Piggybacking on that, we also now have a brand new version of the Favored Enemy feature. And this feature now gives you the Hunter's Mark spell prepared all the time, and also gives you free castings of it a certain number of times per day. This is great because it means those castings will no longer compete with your spellcasting as a Ranger if you want to do other things with your spells. Hunter's Mark is the way that you mark an enemy as your favored foe. It's going to make it so that you deal more damage to them. And if you're in a pursuit situation in your adventure, it means you're going to have an easier time of tracking them. Now we'll come back to this spell as we journey upward through the levels in this class, because we're going to see that the new Ranger then has that spell improved at later levels.
So, I can agree. Spellcasting at first level, 100% an improvement. I like that they did it on Paladin. I like that they did it here on Ranger. They haven't talked about it yet, but Weapon Mastery also added at first level for Ranger. Weapon Mastery arguably does change. Every class that has access to Weapon Mastery does get a massive improvement with the addition of Weapon Mastery. Ranger is one of the classes that gets that. However, Hunter's Mark being your class feature is unfortunate. Yes, it does give you free castings, which no one can argue that having castings of Hunter's Mark without you expending spell slots is great, but it also still functions, at least at level 1 anyway, still like Hunter's Mark, in that it is still a concentration spell. It is still your bonus action to cast it. This is something that could have very easily benefited from some of the other adjustments that we've seen, like perhaps if Hunter's Mark was non-concentration, perhaps if it was something that you could cast instead of especially if like we did like you can cast a special version of Hunter's Mark that you can activate as part of an attack, because I feel like bonus action Hunter's Mark very much in my mind feels like more designed for the like an archer based Ranger, because obviously if you're using 2 weapons, now obviously if they have the Nick property, you can still do the 2 attacks with the bonus actions and all that, but you're still sacrificing a bonus action up front, whereas you could possibly make even more attacks with 2 weapons. So I think if it was something like it was activated as part of the attack, some of the things they mentioned, like we saw with some of the Paladin oaths, right? Like Vow of Enmity, from a Vengeance Paladin, instead of it being an action or a bonus action to activate Vow of Enmity, you can now activate it as part of an attack. Activating Hunter's Mark as part of an attack, I think, would be a fantastic change that would actually make it feel like a shift or an adjustment. It is still making a first level spell the whole identity of your class, which is unfortunate. I mean, I would argue that while Eldritch Blast is an identity for the Warlock, the changes that they've made to Warlock have changed that to make Eldritch Blast not the whole main functionality of the Warlock. It would arguably be more invocations, and the way their spellcasting work makes a Warlock unique, not tying it to a specific spell or cantrip. Whereas we are very much tying the Ranger entirely to one singular spell. A spell that I believe still through, and I'd have to check, but I believe through, like, still, again, magical secrets and things, a bard could gain access to. I believe a Vow of Enmity paladin still gets access to Hunter's Mark. So your whole class identity is a spell that other classes have access to as well. It just, I don't know, just seems odd to me. But again, it also is concentration. So it will hold your concentration slot, not allowing you to cast any other spells that are concentration.
We're going to stay here at first level for now,
Okay.
because also at first level, Rangers get weapon mastery.
Yeah.
Having spellcasting with sort of favorite enemy as the piggybacking on spellcasting, that's the magic side of the Ranger. Well, we also now have weapon mastery. And this means that Rangers, like all of our classes that are getting weapon mastery, will get to enjoy the brand new tactical options that the weapon mastery system provides. And because Rangers have a very broad weapon selection, that means I think we're going to see many different flavored Rangers just in terms of their weapon use. At level 2, Rangers get fighting style, which was a feature that the 2014 Ranger had, and then also a new feature called Deft Explorer. And there was a version of Deft Explorer as an option in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The version that's now here in the new player's handbook gives you expertise in a skill of your choice that you have proficiency in, and also lets you pick 2 more languages that you know. This feature is all about the skillfulness that Rangers traditionally have, particularly because of how much they roam. I mean, it's in the name. It's often easy to forget that what Ranger is referring to is it is a person who ranges far and wide. And so seeing the world, particularly the natural world, but also the people who live in that world, is a really fundamental part of the Ranger's identity.
So, for those of you mentioning, like, isn't Paladin's identity Smite? Well, again, previously it was not a spell. It is now, but I would also argue that Paladins have other things that identify them as a Paladin. For example, again, Find Steed, which is also a spell, I'll admit, but Lay on Hands, or the various auras that they get, Channel Divinity, they have a bunch of different things that makes a Paladin a Paladin. And those are a bunch of different options that you have. And unfortunately, as we'll learn as you get to higher levels, certain abilities that you have as a paladin just outclass Hunter's Mark. For example, I think it is still at level 11, paladins get, I don't know if they changed the name, but basically what was called Improved Divine Smite, which is every time you hit with a weapon, you just deal a d8 radiant damage, extra radiant damage. And that's an always on thing, constantly. And that just outclasses Hunter's Mark in every possible scenario, especially because of the changes to fighting styles with Paladin, where you could now take 2-weapon fighting if you wanted to as a Paladin, because previously, remember, you were limited in the number of, in the number of fighting styles you could get. Like, they had a curated list of fighting styles, as opposed to now you can kind of just take whatever you'd like. I just want to see if we have that real quick. We do. Let's see. Yeah. It's called Radiant Strikes for a Paladin at level 11. It was previously called Improved Divine Smite. It's now called Radiant Strikes, and it is exactly the same as it was in 2014. It just now works with unarmed strikes. So a level 11 Paladin will just deal an extra d8 radiant damage on every weapon they they make every turn. Also works on opportunity attacks as well. That just beats, I mean, granted, that's level 11, so consider that, right? It is level 11, but it does beat out Hunter's Mark just on the die face alone. All right, let's continue.
The other feature I mentioned at this level, fighting style, has been upgraded since its 2014 version because Rangers are no longer limited to a sort of subsection of the fighting style
We're just talking
options in the
about this,
game.
yeah.
They, like paladins and fighters, can choose from the whole list of fighting style options that are now in the feat chapter of this book, and the number of options there is greater than the number of options in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Now, we also provided yet an additional choice in this fighting style feature. If you as a Ranger player would rather your Ranger lean more on the magic side of your class identity, you have the option of foregoing one of the fighting style feats, instead taking this option called Druidic Warrior, which is then going to give you some Druid cantrips to add to your kit. And we
Also, for those of you bringing up the expert classes, I think they actually officially ditched that terminology. They had like the experts, the warriors, the priests. They ditched that. I don't think I've seen any reference to expert, priest, any of that kind of stuff. They ditched those like nomenclatures for those classes. I think the reason that they'd had those originally was they were tied to the spell lists that they'd had originally, which remember they had curated, like they had like the Arcana spell list, the nature primal spell list or whatever. They went away from that as well, so that's gone. So things like that has shifted. And they did. I will say, Deft Explorer is definitely a nice thing to at level 2 get expertise in a skill that you already have proficiency in. Having a freebie kind of expertise is nice, and then it is 2 languages of your choice, which I also like. But again, languages are one of those things that could be all or nothing on your campaign, depending on your DM. So I can't really comment on language proficiencies one way or another because it is very much dependent on how your DM feels about it. I will tell you again, like I said, fighting style is great. The fact that it's expanded to the full list, and they had a Druidic Warrior or some similar version of that in Tasha's Cauldron, which is similar to what the Paladin has again, where you can forgo a fighting style in favor of getting some cantrips. I'm not ever really sure if that's gonna be the play for me. Like, if I had an opportunity to get an additional fighting style from one way or another, then maybe I would take that one so I could have the cantrips and then possibly get like a more readily applicable fighting style like archery or 2-weapon fighting or even defense. So I definitely level 2 is better than it was. Again, fighting style always good. And Deft Explorer is definitely something like that's a passive ability, right? Being able to snag expertise in perception very early on is always nice, especially with how many DMs make perception checks a really common thing. And you being a ranger, also a good thing to have, right? You're out, you're searching for stuff. Definitely makes sense. So I get that. I think that's definitely an improvement, but I wouldn't call it wholly new because a version of it, like they said, was in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
wanted to make it easier for Ranger players.
Comprehend languages is a level 1 ritual spell,
As we've done in several of the other classes in the New Player's Handbook, to nudge the class in the direction they want to go with it when it comes to, especially in hybrid classes, how much do I want to lean in the weapon side of my identity and how much do I want to lean on the spellcasting side. At 3rd level, like all the other classes, you get your subclass. We'll come back to those after we've traveled through the whole class. The Ranger still has extra attack. At level 6, the Ranger gets a feature now called Roving, because again, they travel far and wide. And because of this feature, Rangers will now have a boost to their speed, a 10-foot boost to be precise, while they aren't wearing heavy armor. And on top of that, all Rangers now at this level also gain a climb speed and a swim speed, because Rangers are meant to be the people who are best equipped to explore pretty much any kind of environment. And we support that fantasy both with the class features that are present, but also through the spells. There'll be many familiar spells from the 2014 spell list, but people will also see there are some additions to that list, so it's a bit more robust. And now, whenever a Ranger finishes a long rest, they can change one of the spells that they have prepared. This is a big change for Rangers, because it used to be that they had their list of spells and they could only change one of them whenever they would level up. But now it's every day when they finish a long rest, they can change one.
So that is something that I don't hear a lot of people mentioning is the change to the prepared kind of spell list that Rangers have, right? So like they said, whenever you finish a long rest, you can replace one spell on your list with another Ranger spell list for which you have the spell slots to cast it. That is a huge improvement in versatility because you were previously locked into almost a spells known situation that most other bards and sorcerers have, where you're pretty much locked in. They're giving you the versatility to now shift that on a long rest. Again, it's not like a full blown paladin or cleric or druid situation with your spells or wizard, but it does provide you more versatility. And that's a nice little addition to give you that. It also bumps up their total spells prepared to 15, which is nice as well to give you more spell options. So definitely additional versatility there. And that is, again, a very useful and powerful jump. So I do appreciate that. I also like the tweak to roving. I do believe a version of roving or some other feature might have been called bundled into something else in the Tasha's Ranger, which was this increase to movement speed. Because I'm pretty sure there was a version, like I said, of that in Tasha's Cauldron, but I thought it was like you got a movement speed increase and you could get either like you get a swim or a climb speed, or if you have a swim or a climb speed, it added the movement increase to that as well. Just being a flat plus 10 movement speed is nice, and then granting the swim and climb speed on top of that, now giving you, for most classes, a base 40-foot movement speed that includes climb and swim is very nice. It's such a simple little tweak that I definitely do appreciate. Obviously, that's going to put you in line movement wise with things like the barbarian, who's going to get the extra movement. It's obviously going to pale in comparison to something like the monk, who doesn't necessarily need a climb speed because at a point they can run up vertical surfaces anyway. But it's just a nice little feature, and it does tap into this concept of, if we really want rangers to be considered um, these sort of nature experts, travelers, people out in the wild, them having an innate climb and swim speed makes sense to me. So I'm on board with that. So we like that.
So that's back at first level in the spellcasting feature, but I bring it up now talking about just the Ranger's exploration side, because we made this change in spellcasting to better support the utility side of the Ranger's spell use. Because the Ranger's spell list has more utility than it does have outright damage.
A lot of concentration spells, though.
And so because of that utility focus, we wanted Rangers to be able to at least change one spell a day, depending on the situation that's ahead of them, at least that they're guessing is ahead of them in the coming adventuring day. As before, the subclass features keep coming, ability score improvement keeps coming. Up at 19th level, like all the classes in the new player's handbook, there's...
So, take this with a grain of salt, but I don't believe on any of the other classes videos they needed to mention that subclass features keep coming and ability score improvements keep coming. Now, again, maybe I'm just nitpicking because I'm looking for things to nitpick, but I don't recall us having to call out that you get ability score improvements at later levels on the other class reveal videos, but we did it here on the Ranger.
Epic boon, but they also now get 2 more expertise options. So the Ranger is going to be even more skilled, even more of an expert than they were in 2014. And at 10th level, they get a feature called Tireless. And with this...
So in case you missed that, that was 2 more. So you do still get your one from, was it Deft Explorer or whatever it was, the one that you get at level 2. You got an expertise in a skill. Now they're saying, presumably at a later level, we were talking about stuff that happened at like level 5 or 7. So sometime later on, you're going to get expertise in 2 additional skills. So inborn base Ranger, you're going to have 3 different instances of expertise. Now, obviously, there are things like feats like Skill Expert, which will also grant you another expertise as well. So there's definitely options to give you more expertise as a Ranger. And to somebody who brought up the concept of they're the expert class, again, for those of you who missed that, there was a point in time during the Unearthed Arcana where they were dividing up all of the classes into different groups, experts, warriors, priests, and mages, or something like that. So them kind of still, there's like a remnant of that expert class option by giving the ranger inborn base 3 different skills that they have expertise in. And I do like that, right? That does fit. They're not going to be as good at being an expert as, say, like the rogue, who will get access to expertise in a variety of things significantly earlier. Whereas you, as the ranger, are still going to have 1 expertise at level 2 and an additional 2 at some point later on. But it sounds like the ranger or the rogue will already have theirs already. So you're still getting them just a little bit later. And that makes sense. You do have other things that you're doing, so you're not as good at being like an expert in things as, say, the rogue or possibly even the bard. But you are still getting access to that, which is a change. And it's not like a variant rule from Tasha's. This is just inborn base to the class, which is definitely an improvement. So appreciate that.
This feature, the ranger, a certain number of times per day, can give themselves temporary hit points, representing a resilience that they are.
Again, art is fantastic. We're talking about tireless right now, the ability to give yourself temporary hit points.
Drawing into themselves from nature itself. And they also have an always-on ability that whenever they finish a short rest, if they have any exhaustion levels, the number of exhaustion levels they have reduces by 1. Most people have to take a long rest to have their exhaustion go down by 1, but rangers, who again are meant to be the ones who are best equipped to roam across vast distances, their exhaustion goes away faster.
I like that a lot, right? The ability to grant yourself temporary hit points, depending on how many temporary hit points it is, kind of determines how useful that is. If we were to look at the Unearthed Arcana 6, it was, which is still called Tireless, which does still come online at level 10. In the Unearthed Arcana, it was, as an action, you can give yourself temporary hit points equal to a d8 plus your wisdom modifier times per long rest. The fact that it was like, clearly the fact that it's an action makes it designed to be an out of combat option. I don't know if that changed. They didn't really tell us if it was still a full action to do so in the final version. And even in the, if we were to take a look, even in here, you can see it right here, right? As an action, give yourself temporary hit points equal to a d8 plus your wisdom modifier. And then again, this decrease exhaustion, right? When you finish a short rest, decrease your exhaustion level by 1. Now, that is a powerful ability. The temporary hit points is nice. It being a full action seems a little odd. And it is a limited number of temporary hit points, a limited number of times per long rest. But again, no one's going to say no to temporary hit points. There are a variety of other ways that you can get yourself temporary hit points, and possibly even more than this with lower level slots for spells and things. This ability, I love this decrease the exhaustion level by 1 on a short rest. This is arguably something unlike nothing we've seen in the game. Nobody else has an ability like this. This does truly feel like a cool, unique feature of the ranger, and I like that. I also feel like inborn poison resistance or constitution saving throws, if you're going to try to lean into this, they can stay outside and weather the storm, weather the weather, all that kind of stuff, then I think there should be more abilities tied into that, right? Giving them at some point just proficiency in constitution saving throws would be one. Give them immunity to the poisoned condition, or things like that. There's definitely ways you could really tap into that if that's the route you're trying to go. My only complaint about this is a very situational ability, right? It's great to reduce your exhaustion level by 1 once per short rest. That's very powerful. But you have to find yourself in a situation in which you have levels of exhaustion for that ability to even come online, and you don't get it till you hit level 10. Now, if your DM is playing with some sort of homebrew rules, like, again, I am in my game, where when you go down to 0 hit points, and again, I haven't really reread the dying section of the rules glossary to see if they changed it on internally. But in my homebrew games, when you go down to 0 hit points, each time you go down to 0 hit points, you gain a level of exhaustion. That those levels of exhaustion don't hit you until the combat ends. The adrenaline's kind of carrying you through. So in my homebrew version of this, of the rules, because you hit exhaustion when you go to 0, that this ability becomes infinitely more useful because I'm possibly putting an inborn way for you to constantly be getting exhaustion because I wanted to make the yo-yo of down to 0 and back up a little more limited, possibly allowing more preemptive healing to keep people in the fight longer rather than letting them drop and then just popping them back in for return. So because of the rules that I have in my game, the you will see exhaustion more frequently is my point. So therefore this ability is infinitely more useful in a game like mine. But if you're very careful about how you go about things and people aren't casting or using certain abilities that proc exhaustion on you, this ability kind of reminds me of like the changes they made to brutal critical, right? And this was a change they made on the barbarian where they said, we really liked brutal critical allowing you to deal extra damage on a crit, but we tied an entire subclass feature around a 5% chance of you getting and rolling a good number. And if the dice are against you, you have this cool ability that you never get to use. So they changed brutal critical to brutal strikes, which is now a more actionable thing that you can turn on and use when you want because it gives you more agency over that, which is again kind of feels like it falls into a same area. Like we're giving you something that if you have exhaustion, you can reduce it. But like it would be cool if this did something and also let you do this. For example, what I would do is maybe instead of as an action, you can give yourself temporary hit points, which maybe you keep that in there, but you make it like whenever you finish a short rest, you can reduce your levels of exhaustion by 1. Additionally, you gain a D8 plus your wisdom modifier temporary hit points. So that way, the short rest side of things, it's an always on ability. Yeah, it's beneficial if you have exhaustion that you want to reduce because that's a benefit, right? That's a cool extra thing you have. But because it's so specific, you give them you just reword this, right? So like every time you finish a short rest, you're going to get these temporary hit points and if applicable, reduce the level of exhaustion. And then also as an action, you can give yourself temporary hit points, wisdom modifier or proficiency bonus times per long rest. That's a very simple tweak, I think, that makes this beneficial to you all the time. So right, obviously we know temporary hit points don't stack. So if you had 2 temporary, you use the action earlier in the day to give yourself the temporary hit points, you get knocked around a little bit in a fight, you've only got 2 temporary hit points less, but your party's going to take a short rest, then the newer set of temporary hit points overrides the previous, and now you have that. That is one, if you're going to play this version of Ranger as written, I highly recommend you adopt that little homebrew rule, so that way the short rest kind of thing. And that would be like another thing you could do. You could have made like Rangers the master of the short rest. I know it feels odd given that Fighter has so many things that come back on a short rest, as does Warlock. But if you're like taking the concept of a short rest versus a long rest of being like the fact that like you spend so much time in the outdoors in the wild, like you become adept at like finding the ability to gain rest when you can or something like that. You could have done something like that. Taking the concept that like the only thing that this would kind of fly in the face of like trance for elves, but it would be cool to give possibly Ranger the same benefit that elves have as a base ability for trance, where like they get to finish a long rest in 4 hours. That could be a cool thing. Tireless, that could fit really well into that as well, or some point in here where you'd give the Ranger the ability to finish a long rest in 4 hours as opposed to 8 hours. Again, that would be a cool little thing. It fits into the theme we're kind of going for. Ability to, you know, maybe it's only while in like natural environments, like in nature, you could finish a long rest in 4 hours, just like the elves can. Again, like I said, the only reason they probably didn't do that is because that's a thing that elves get. And like that, if you're an elven ranger, then you like those abilities don't work together. And they're very big on trying to avoid giving you things that like would stack and don't give you any benefit. So I don't know if there's a way we could come up with a tweak to that to allow it. But it also, I like this aspect. And actually, as I'm talking this through with all of you, it's got my gears turning in my brain about like what we could do if we really want the Ranger to be the master of natural environments. There's a lot of fun little things we can do with this concept of you're out there weathering the natural environment. There's things we can do to tweak and adjust to give you some of that stuff. And I like that. You know what I mean? Um, I believe they did. Well, I don't know what the exhaustion rules. I'm assuming that's going to be a future one of their reveal videos. Jumping back into the chat here. I'm pretty sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there an ad that ran? I might have missed that. I tried to turn them off when I could, but I just went on a rant. Wasn't looking over here at the side. But I'm assuming like so Monday's video is going to be spells. I assume that sometime soon we're going to get one that might be like conditions or like rules glossary. So we might get to see which version of exhaustion we're dealing with. I think if I recall, the Unearthed Arcana version, is it in here? Do we have it in this one? Exhaustion was just like a cumulative. Oh yeah, let's see. Is it in here? Exhausted. Do they have it? No. I don't see. Oh, really? It's weird that they don't have exhaustion in here as a listed condition. I'm pretty sure exhaustion was basically just like a cumulative negative to every check you make. I thought that's what it was, but I can't believe it's not in here in this particular version of the rules that they had at the end here. I don't know. So we don't know what the full version, right? We know the version from 2014 has like disadvantage on that, and it kind of has like stacking effects. And at level 6 you die. I believe at level 6 you still die in the Unearthed Arcana versions as well. But even still, let's get back to our ranger here. All right, we should probably keep going. We've gone off on a crazy tangent here for quite a while. So, but anyway, like I said, there's things that could be some cool options that we could make some tweaks. But let's keep going.
Most other characters. At level 13, here's where their Hunter's Mark spell starts to improve. So they already always have that spell prepared, and they get a number of free castings of it per day. Starting at level 13, damage can no longer break their concentration on the spell. Still have to concentrate on it.
Your level 13 ability for your ranger is that damage can't break your concentration on the spell. So if you get hit with something that knocks you unconscious or incapacitates you or what have you, you would still lose concentration on the spell. Now, damage can't break you out of that, which is nice, but you still have to concentrate on it, and this is a level 13 ability. So we've once again tied your subclass to, or your class, to this one level 1 spell. And at level 13, we saved a whole ass class feature to just be the damage doesn't break the concentration. You still have to concentrate on it. I would say if you're gonna do improvements to Hunter's Mark being a thing, at 13, it should no longer require concentration if you're gonna stick in this particular route, because I do feel like I would have made it non-concentration probably from level 1 if this is gonna be like a whole class feature. But yeah, level 13, it no longer doesn't break concentration.
This is important so that the spell can't stack with other things that also require concentration. Then it
Specifically designed that it can't stack with concentration of their abilities, sure.
level 14, you get Nature's Veil, where as a bonus action, you can, again, drawing on the primal magic that you draw on as a ranger, just poof, become invisible. It's sort of a supernatural camouflage. The 2014 ranger had the ability at higher level to easily camouflage themselves, but it required them to loop through hiding, through specifically the hide action. Now, it's far more supernatural where just they're gone.
Yeah.
And they are invisible. So it's going to be easier to use and be more effective as the ranger creeps around, perhaps stalking one of their foes.
So that is nice. It is not a spell. It is not a skill check. You just become invisible. And from what I'm looking at in the Unearthed Arcana 6, you just become invisible until either the end or the start of your next turn. I think it's till the end of your, the Nature's Veil and the Unearthed Arcana is you become invisible until the end of your next turn. Now, what's important to note is that this 14th level ability, you don't break the invisibility, by attacking or anything. It's not listed that you break, by making a saving throw or any of that kind of stuff. It's not listed that you break that unless it's listed in the condition invisible. Let's find out. Hang on. Before I speak out of turn. You aren't, yeah, so it gives you the invisible, oops, that's not what we want. It gives you the invisible condition, which, as written here in Unearthed Arcana 6 anyway, you aren't affected by any effect that requires its target to be seen. If you're invisible when you roll initiative, you have advantage. Attack rolls against you have disadvantage, and your attack rolls have advantage. So it's not specified that, like, attacking breaks this invisibility or any of that kind of stuff. So you get, as a bonus action, become invisible until the end of your next turn, and that's a, like, either proficiency bonus or wisdom modifier, like, multiple times per day that you can do that. And this is really powerful because you could bonus action do this on your turn, then take your attacks with advantage, and then starting on your next turn, you still have advantage on those attacks because you are still invisible, because it doesn't start until the end, or end until the end of your next turn. At which point, if you wanted to, you could back-to-back consecutive turns turn yourself invisible using multiple bonus actions on multiple turns to do so. Effectively, like, let's say it's wisdom modifier. I think it's listed here in the Ranger here as wisdom modifier times per long rest. That's my only other kind of complaint, is it seems like we switched over to proficiency bonus times per long rest on many things, but then some classes have, like, an ability score modifier times per long rest. It just seems odd to, like, pick and choose which ones get ability score based ones and which ones just get proficiency bonus. But this one is listed as wisdom modifier times per long rest here in the Unearthed Arcana. So if that made it through, and let's say you do happen to have a 20 wisdom on your Ranger at level 14, you could consecutively, basically for 6 turns, right? Because you activate it and then it's till the end of your next turn. So you could potentially be, by burning a bonus action on multiple turns, just flat out constantly invisible for 6 turns in a row, taking all of your shots at advantage and all attacks being made at you at disadvantage. And the fact that it is not a spell means that it can't be like counterspelled or anything like that. Things like that. So depending on, it's not an interaction where any spell related things will happen. So you could effectively just be invisible magically for like 6 turns in a row, taking all of your shots and doing all of your things with no issue. That is a very cool and powerful ability, and I like that a lot. That is a unique thing. We do not have any other class that I know of at this point that is capable of doing something like this without expending a spell slot or concentrating on something. So the fact that you can do this while, because you're going to have to concentrate on Hunter's Mark, the fact that you could stay invisible while also concentrating on Hunter's Mark is a very powerful ability. This is a nice thing to have because it kind of, in this instance, lets you circumvent the kind of like the double spell option. So you don't need to cast invisibility. You could just be invisible. But again, we're also not getting this ability till we're level 14. So anyway, that's still pretty cool though. All right, let's continue on.
We also have at level 17 another upgrade to Hunter's Mark, where now the Ranger always has advantage on attack rolls against whoever is currently marked by their Hunter's Mark.
Nice.
Level 18.
Okay, that is good. Level 17 is you now have advantage on any creature marked by your Hunter's Mark. So at least for concentrating on that spell, you are giving yourself advantage on those attacks. That is very nice. That also comes online at level 17, which is very late. And all I can think of is look over to the fighter, who at like level 11 or level 13, when they miss an attack roll, can just auto have advantage on the next attack they make. And they also have an extra attack by the time they have that because they're at least level 11. So fighters can just auto-initiate advantage on an attack by utilizing just hitting or missing. And then I also looked again to the Vengeance Paladin, who has Vow of Enmity, which again, they can trigger as part of a strike, which also does not require concentration, which now can also be transferred to another target upon you killing the target that has the Vow of Enmity on it. And you also get multiple uses of that kind of for free per day because it's a channel divinity and you get 1 channel divinity back on a short rest, and you think you get 3 as a paladin now. Again, that's at level 3 Vow of Enmity. So either way, keep going.
They get blind sight out to 30 feet.
That was in the 2014 Player's Handbook. We like that. Blind Sight is, again, another very limited ability. The only other way to get Blind Sight consistently is, I believe, there is a fighting style called Blind Fighting that gives you Blind Sight out to 10 feet. Ranger would be the person that gets the best version of that, which I love because that also plays into this kind of, I think, and again, you've seen this thus far, it feels like the Ranger is not really sure what it wants its identity to be. This blind sight concept of being so immersed in like the natural surroundings and what's going on, it fits the Ranger very well, in my opinion. Granted, it's not till level 18 that you get this, but we also heard in one of the other videos that dwarves get tremor sense at level 1, so who knows?
As they become almost like a creature of the wilds, being able to, even if they're blinded, see or effectively see around them. And then at 20th level, the damage of their hunter's mark increases. So it is now a D10 rather than a D6.
Did you hear that, folks? Did you hear that? Your level 20 ability for a Ranger is your hunter's mark goes to a D10 instead of a D6. It is still concentration. You still have the ability that you have to cast it as a bonus action. You still have to concentrate on it. And all it does is increase your damage die from a D6 to a D10. That's your capstone ability for the Ranger. I'm sorry. What? It doesn't add D6s. That would be great. That actually would be a really interesting feature if as you leveled up the number of D, like at a certain point, maybe it increased to a D. If you wanted to do this scaling damage where you jump it from a D6 to a D10 at 20th level, maybe you do something where like it goes up over time, similar to like a monk's unarmed strike martial arts die, where like, oh hey, it's a D8 at this level, it's a D10 at this level, D12 at this level, and maybe at level 20 you bump it up significantly. Maybe it's a D10 plus your wisdom modifier would be a lot better because that's going to increase the guaranteed damage. It is still a die roll of a D10. You can still roll a 1 on that D10. You're not really necessarily increasing the overall damage. There's the potential to increase it from a D6 to a D10, but that's not a guarantee. And then you look at some of the other capstones, like look at the new Monk capstone. Monks had a really shitty capstone in 2014. Monks in the Unearthed Arcana got +4 dexterity, +4 wisdom, similar to how the barbarians get +4 strength, +4 constitution. Like, that's a capstone, right? The wizard picking 2 third-level spells and just getting to freebie cast them as their signature spells. All of the transformations that paladins get at 20th level. So many awesome, badass things that these other classes get, and we bumped your damage die of a first-level spell from a D6 to a D10 because we based your entire subclass or your class identity around one first-level spell that we don't even give it to you non-concentration at any point. Like, and again, as I mentioned, level 11 Paladin gets Radiant Strikes. Every one of their hits does an extra D8 Radiant damage every turn, every time, consistently from level 11 through level 20, not even including smites. That's just a thing you always get. Our good friends, the Druid, who we talked through extensively yesterday, if you go with the Primal Strike option, it is only once per turn, so consider that, whereas the Ranger can as many attacks as they have, which on most instances is usually going to be 2, right? Regular attack and extra attack. Our good friend the Druid with Primal Strike can just deal once per turn, which again, more often than not, the Druid is only going to have 1 attack per turn, could deal an extra D8 cold, fire, lightning, thunder, poison damage with a strike. And then at a higher level, it goes up by the time the Ranger gets to the same level as the druid, once per turn, the druid could deal 2d8 extra damage on top of the end of their attacks. And it's just an always-on ability, non-concentration, if you chose the Primal Strike feature. Again, were you to choose the Moon Druid in animal form, you could be doing an extra 2d8 plus 2d10 extra damage on top of for your singular strike. Always on, non-concentration. I mean, you look at it's so many of these other things. You look at all the adjustments we talked about with the fighter, about all the improvements, the tactical movement, the ability to generate advantage, the ability to do all these other cool things. I mean, the rogue has sneak attack. The barbarian now has brutal strikes, a way to just juice up damage on a hit, and then also have the versatility to do all the other cool things that barbarians can do now, where they can knock people back, combo the knockback with the push attack of a weapon, all these other cool things that they can do. I mean, the warlock with one of their invocations gets 3 attacks, and they can have those attacks deal extra damage and heal them with Thirsting Blade on every strike that they do. It's a thing they could just choose. Now, it is an invocation. You have to choose it, so you might not necessarily automatically get that, whereas the Ranger does automatically get that extra D10 of damage on their Hunter's Mark. But there are, and like, I understand the concept too, right, that classes don't always necessarily need to deal damage. I do recognize that, right? There's a difference in how you go about this, where some classes need to deal damage, some classes have utility, but everybody needs to be combat effective to some degree. And if you look at this on a paper instance of like which one is different, and again, I say Paladin, as I've said many times, is arguably the closest analog to Ranger in a lot of aspects, as they are both half casters who now have like the same progression of certain abilities, like fighting styles, like weapon mastery, like their spell casting, right? They're very mirrored in that aspect. Granted, different a lot in concept, right? A Paladin versus a Ranger, very different in the way it goes about it. But like Paladins get all these other unique abilities, and the Ranger gets like some movement speed, a situational short rest thing, and then improvements to 1 first level spell. And like those are codified class features. Whereas like, yeah, you could argue that now that Paladin Smite is a spell, they do have that, but those spells increase in and of themselves. They're not a class feature to like taking out one of your class feature slots to improve it. Divine Smite in and of itself just increases in scales in damage as you use higher level spell slots to cast it, because of just how it is. And they get access to all of the other Smite spells, which do different things at different levels. And they still get 1 freebie casting of one of those in there. You do get more freebie casting of Hunter's Mark, but depending on the Paladin spell slot you use for Smite, it's not concentration. So you're not wasting your concentration on it. And those things beef up and get stronger in and of themselves in just the spell itself. Whereas Hunter's Mark just increases the duration of how long it lets you track them with higher level spell slots. So we had to use up 3 different Ranger class features to improve Hunter's Mark. So you get level 1, Hunter's Mark, and freebie casting. One of the earlier levels, I think they said it was 13. It doesn't break concentration on damage. So that's 2 features for it. 17 advantage, which is huge. I'm not going to discount advantage on all attacks you make against that, because it is still a damage die. It will still double on a crit, so that's huge. And then at level 20, so 4 class features were devoted to Hunter's Mark, one of which just giving you access to it, and then the other 3 later on devoted to increasing or altering the way Hunter's Mark is cast. Whereas you could have possibly just changed the way Hunter's Mark worked in its base form, or done something similar to the Paladin, where the Paladin has multiple smites, right? Like they have, obviously, Divine Smite is the base one, and Hunter's Mark could be the base one for it. And then you could have had, like, you know, you have, like, Blinding Smite. You could have had, like, Blinding Mark. That would probably be the simplest way to go about it, is just giving the Ranger different marks, like, that do different things. Instead of, like, I deal a little bit extra damage and I can track you, maybe I could put a Searing Mark on you, and that does burn and fire damage to you every turn, or a Blinding Mark, where as long as the mark is on you, you are blinded, or something like that. That's another really simple little change that kind of marries what the Paladin does. Not that you need to marry yourself 100% to the Paladin as far as scaling goes, but for the longest time, especially in 2014, a lot of people could argue that Paladin was one of the best designed classes that did most of the stuff. Was it overpowered at times? Yes, that's why we changed the way Divine Smite works, but that's the only adjustment they really made to Paladins, if not boosting up everything else. So to have your level 20 ability be a die adjustment and not even adding multiple die, just changing from a D6 to a D10, you could have made this Hunter's Mark is 3D6 or 2D6, at least 2D6, right? So you can get maybe 4D6 if you crit. Would be nice. I mean, it doesn't even rival in comparison to sneak attack at that level, right? I mean, at level 20, a rogue's turning just getting a free natural 20, right? That's a rogue capstone ability. When you make an attack roll or any D20 test, you could just choose to make that roll a 20. So that could be a skill check, that could be a saving throw, that could be an attack roll, auto-triggering critical hit sneak attack damage as your level 20 ability. And I'm pretty sure that's once per short rest. Like, where is the scaling on the power level? It is all over the place. We have I mean, we haven't gotten to the bard yet, but like you have like the valor bard, which is obviously like your fighter style bard. I mean, hell, monks get 3 attacks with flurry of blows at level 11. So monks now could attack 5 times in a turn. And at level 11, a monk is dealing a D8 damage with their unarmed strikes. So, or maybe they might be dealing a D10 with their unarmed strikes at level 11. And they could do with 1 discipline point expenditure, could be dealing 5 attacks. So that's potentially 5 D10 on a turn, not including if you have anything that allows you to deal extra damage on those attacks. Like, you're already outclassing the ranger in damage in a variety of other ways. And honestly, a monk could do so much things that are similar with their movement abilities, their resistances to damage and things. So it's really upsetting to me as a ranger fan to see this not having a thing here. But let's keep going.
All of this together, when you combine the new features, the enhanced spell list, the ability to use more of your spells as a ranger, means you will be the paramount explorer and survivalist in the wilds, supporting your party with your various abilities, but also being a badass on your own.
Perfect. That's amazing. Those are huge changes.
Again, it's a new class.
Yeah.
I mean, it is top to bottom.
Some of you are bringing up Mystic Mark in Tales of the Valiant, and I agree. It's very similar in nature. It is a part of an attack, and it is non-concentration. That's basically what we're suggesting, that you would make these adjustments to Hunter's Mark. Give it, like, it's so simple to say, like, you call it whatever you want, and you get a custom version of Hunter's Mark that you can apply as part of an attack roll and as non-concentration. And that makes, you could keep, all you'd have to do is change the level 13 ability to do something else. Honestly, if we're going to keep what Hunter's Mark is the Ranger's like identity, I would make, you can cast you get Hunter's Mark as a spell, always prepared at level 1. Additionally, you can, hang on. Let's hang on. Let's come over here. All right. So here's my tweaks that I would make. At level 1, you know the Hunter's Mark spell, and it is always prepared for you. Additionally, you can cast a specialized version of the Hunter's Mark spell, Wisdom modifier or proficiency bonus times per long rest. This version of Hunter's Mark can be applied as part of an attack and is not concentration. And that's your level 1 ability. That makes it unique, right? You don't have unlimited uses of non-concentration Hunter's Mark. You have proficiency bonus times per long rest uses. So starts off at 2, scales up to 6. These are non-concentration that can be done and applied as part of an attack. And I still don't think that's game-breaking. Now, eventually, later on, 13, we have this ability where damage doesn't break your concentration. You could keep that for the non-specialized uses of Hunter's Mark. But you could also do something like maybe if you want to go with the damage scaling, maybe at level 13 the damage die goes up to a D8. Or maybe at level 13 the damage die goes up to a D10, let's say. You still keep your level 17 ability where it has advantage on attacks. And then level 20, you could do something like the damage die increases to a D12, and you add your wisdom modifier to the damage, something like that. It's not great. I don't love tying everything to Hunter's Mark as a spell, but that increases your damage die swing, if you were to say make it up to a D12. And adding your wisdom modifier to the damage will on average add 10 damage to the damage you output per turn by giving you guaranteed damage if you have a 20 wisdom. I don't love that. I still think there's better things we could do with this, but that would be a simple little tweak that doesn't change too much in the grand scheme of the class. It gives you, the ability to still cast spells like Zephyr Strike or other things like that that are concentration. But yeah, I think so. Yes, Mr. Blind Mage, I did this because I knew I was going to be raging on this video, and I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wear my Bandit Hawaiian shirt because people aren't going to get that mad at me. How can you be mad at a bluey shirt, right? Like, Galen Stirrup, you said, do we know if the Hunter's Mark spell has changed? I believe they, I don't know. Do we have, the thing is, we've had so many different iterations in the spells. Let's see, did they change? Let's see if there's anything in the Ranger article that they put out. See if it changes it at all. Let's see. Hunter's Mark. Trying to see if they list anything. The 2024 Player's Handbook strengthens the Ranger's class relationship with the trademark spell Hunter's Mark. Several of the 2024 okay, work off of that. It doesn't say much easier. Yeah, it doesn't say in the article. So I'm assuming because they had changed it once to make Hunter's Mark deal, it was only limited to once per turn, and then it dealt increased damage. It looks like based on everything we're seeing here that they basically reverted because we're not hearing anything different. And I feel like the fact that they said that, Hunter's Mark is this, they didn't like if Hunter's Mark was a changed spell and we made Hunter's Mark the entire version of the Ranger, like why would you not be talking about the tweaks to Hunter's Mark right out the gate that this spell has changed? Right? They made a point to bring up in the Druid that the Druid gets several new spells like Font of Moonlight and Starry Wisp. They didn't really go into what those spells did, but they made a point to say that those are new spells that they gain access to. So I don't see why you wouldn't, if, Hunter's Mark was drastically shifted in one way or another to be an entirely different spell, why you wouldn't go over that in this video, especially because we talked about Hunter's Mark right out the gate. So based on that and all that's been said, even in the D&D Beyond articles, not calling it out different, I'm under the impression that Hunter's Mark is basically the Hunter's Mark you have in 2014 is the same Hunter's Mark that you're having. Because he even mentioned that, like, you can better track people, and they mentioned that it's a D6 and that it goes up to a D10. So it sounds like it is exactly the same Hunter's Mark that you have seen in 2014. So if you're keeping that, because the only way I could see it is like, I mean, it can't be worse, right? Like, but anyway, as I was saying, I think, good job to adapting to no notice nights. Been on nights for 6 months now. Yeah, well, thank you, Impractical Nurse. There's another storm coming tomorrow. I'm trying to shift myself into, day shifts if possible, but we'll see how that goes. Technically correct is the best kind of correct. Yeah. So I would say, so a thought I had, we're going to get into the subclasses here in just a second. those are a couple ways you could make tweaks to this version of the Ranger. The most minimal changes you could make without truly upsetting the apple cart would be those couple adjustments that we talked about, allowing you to cast a specialized version of Hunter's Mark that is activated as part of an attack and is non-concentration, scaling the damage at earlier points, adding a high level wisdom modifier to that, because that's not even that game breaking at level 20 to add wisdom modifier to your attack rolls. Because if you recall, that was what Foe Slayer used to be at level 20, was like you add your wisdom modifier to the attack roll or the damage roll. So that like is what used to be, was that was the thing. Now it's like we're just increasing the damage die from a D6 to a D10. So we're kind of hearkening back to older design that was just more solid damage output. Another thought you could be is, instead of tying it to wisdom modifier, tie it to proficiency bonus, right? That's not a thing we do too often, but like your Hunter's Mark deals additional damage equal to your proficiency bonus on a hit, right? So that starts off, I mean, especially depending on when you add that in. If you add that at like say 13, or you could do something similar to like a rage damage, where like a rage damage is like a solid number that starts off at 2 and scales to 4. You could add something like that and have a Hunter's Mark damage column that like your Hunter's Mark does an additional whatever damage as determined by the table. So like maybe start off where Hunter's Mark, you do a D6 plus 2 damage, and the maximum it is at a higher level is a D6 plus 4. I think saving it to level 20 to just give you a flat out plus 5 damage if like you had to, or again, maybe it's tied to proficiency bonus, so it's plus 6 damage at level 20. I don't know. Those are thoughts that I had. If you tie it to wisdom modifier, technically, because they've allowed things to allow you to get wisdom to go past level 20, that could be an option, right, to increase the damage. So there's definitely options there. I think we want to increase the guaranteed damage, not the swing damage. So making those couple of tweaks would be an interesting way to go about it. Another thing that I'd thought about, because people brought it up, and I thought it would also be an interesting concept, would be reworking the Ranger to essentially be the nature version of the Warlock, where you not in every aspect, but like having natural invocations similar to how the Warlock has their invocations. I know that's very much the Warlock shtick, so you don't necessarily want to step on the toes, but a similar concept where they'd have a list of kind of invocations that they could choose different abilities, and that could allow you to really vary the way your different Rangers are played. But I really can't get behind these these Hunter's Mark is the whole class thing. It just really bugs me. Or Hunter's Mark scaling like a cantrip somebody brought up. That's pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and get back into hearing about the subclasses now.
Bottom, rebuilt, and so much of that done in conversation with the community through Unearthed Arcana.
And heavily focus on that fantasy that you have. If you are wanting to play a Ranger, you're dealing that damage, you're wandering, you are the best at so many things that you should be the best at, and you also can have expertise in the things that you should.
And many of these benefits also are very concrete. One of our misses in the 2014 Ranger is we had some really nice flavorful abilities having to do with different environments or different types of creatures that didn't really deliver a reliable concrete game experience. And everything that we've done here has been about delivering the fantasy of the Ranger and doing it in a very direct, fun way, so that you get your feature and you get to be Rangery.
Yeah.
Then we took that philosophy and carried it into the subclasses. We have the Hunter and the Beastmaster both returning from the 2014 Player's Handbook, but both of them redesigned.
Yeah.
And then they are joined by the Gloom Stalker and the Fey Wanderer. How about we talk about the Beastmaster first?
Yeah, let's talk about the Beastmaster, because not only has this class been rebuilt, this is effectively a new subclass as well.
Yeah, so the Beastmaster subclass, it shares the name with the 2014 version and the theme of the Ranger who has this supernatural bond with a beast, but otherwise beyond the name and the theme,
It's completely new.
it is a brand new subclass. And people got to see an earlier version of this new subclass in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, specifically in the new creature options, because in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, we introduced this idea of these sort of primal beasts that the Ranger can bond with, the beast of the land, the beast of the sky, and the beast of the sea. But now you get to see that piece that originally appeared in Tasha's, now integrated in with the whole subclass and the whole subclass redone around that. And so now you have a subclass where you and your primal beast are this united unit.
Yeah.
You have this mystical connection with each other. You're now, as a ranger, going to be able to command your beast as a bonus action instead of an action, which means
almost every other pet class that was released had an option for a pet post the player's handbook had this capability. Artificer, Wildfire Druid, any of these ones that had a pet, it was always a bonus action to command. So we're just really saying what we've adjusted since the 2014 version here.
Means that you will feel much more than you did in the 2014 version, like you and your beast companion are working in tandem with each other. We've made it so that also this beast that you choose, because rather than it being a stat block you go fish out of the monster manual, is one of these 3 stat blocks specifically designed for this subclass. We could make each of these stat blocks sort of level up with you, and each one have its own shtick, whether it's, again, land-related, sky-related, or sea-related.
And as you said, these level up. They gain power over time.
Yes, because they are a fundamental part of your power as a Beastmaster Ranger, and so we wanted to ensure from the inside, by designing these creatures specifically for this subclass, ensure that they are delivering the effectiveness they need to be delivering for you over the course of your career as a Beastmaster. All of it together means I think this is going to be a thrilling subclass, not only for people who have already played a Beastmaster, but also people who have not yet tried it out and had the fun of almost having 2 characters, because the Beastmaster is one of the few subclasses in the game where it's really about not only playing your ranger, it's also about playing your ranger's beast friend. And that friend can almost take on a role of being like a member of the party. The Beast Companion just keeps getting better with you. What you can do with it in terms of your commands improves, and it culminates with you even being able to share spells with your companion. So that when you cast a spell targeting yourself, you can also have your Beast Companion benefit as well. And all of the improvements inside the subclass mean that you just over time become more and more of this amazing sort of 2 beings in total sync with each other, working as an exploration and fighting unit.
Oh, that's fascinating. So if I cast a healing spell, that spell may also affect my beast.
That's no different than 2014.
Yes,
at the same time.
As long as it's within 30 feet of you,
That's still the same as 2014.
You could cast Cure Wounds on yourself, and your beast 30 feet away is then also healed.
Oh, that's amazing.
And also, just again, driving home how you are this unified unit, you also get to the point where your hunter's mark starts benefiting your beast.
Oh, that's strong.
Yes.
Not really.
when the beast is enjoying hunter's mark, that becomes dangerous. So this brings us to Fey Wanderer.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that's the art for the Gloom Stalker, but either way. Let's take a look. Right? Here we go. Here is this is the Unearthed Arcana 6, but I don't believe much has changed. So we have these stat blocks here, right? Beast of the land, beast of the sky, beast of the sea. And this is basically, again, almost a direct port over from Tasha's Cauldron. It is interesting to me that they did something similar for this for the wild shape for the druid, and people said they didn't like it, so that they went back to more using the animal stat blocks for wild shape, but they did this kind of version of it for the ranger. So we have this. I don't believe these changed very much, although I do believe possibly some of these instances that were proficiency bonus, which is nice because it's a static number, are now wisdom modifier. Does it say that in the version that we have on the D&D Beyond thing? Let's see. Yeah. Your primal companion's AC and damage now scales off your wisdom modifier, which is what it says right here in this 2024 versus 2014 D&D Beyond article. So previously in the Unearthed Arcana, your animal companion's armor class and their damage was based off of your proficiency bonus. So here it would do like Beast of the Land, 13 plus your proficiency bonus in natural armor. Damage was a d8 plus 2 plus your proficiency bonus. That is now tied to your wisdom modifier. So, in my opinion, it's arguably, it could be very strong or stronger at the start, depending on how high your wisdom modifier is based on how you generate ability scores. But later on, it will probably either even out or possibly become weaker because proficiency bonus, right? You might not have a great wisdom modifier. You might have like a decent one, but depending on how you go about generating ability scores for your game, you might be focusing more on dexterity and constitution, less on wisdom. But you also could, in theory, negatively impact your animal companion's armor class and damage by having a negative wisdom modifier, depending on how you go about it. So that's an interesting change. Now they mentioned the other abilities here, right? This one is when you use your bonus action to command your primal companion to make it make an action. You can also command it to take the dash, disengage, dodge, help, or hide or help action as a bonus action, which is good because that what it's basically saying is you are using your bonus action to command them to do an action, and then they also get an access to their bonus action to do dash, disengage, dodge, or help. I would almost always probably have my animal companion do dodge because that would help. Because again, you are still limited in the hit points, so a fireball can still hurt your animal companion. Then we have Bestial Fury here at 11, which is kind of the ones they were talking about, where now it can make let's see. It can attack twice, which is something, right? Because now you essentially, if you're doing it this way, you now have 4 attacks on a turn, which is definitely an improvement, right? Because you could do 2 attacks with yourself, use your bonus action to command your primal companion to make an attack. Now at level 11, it's making 2 attacks, so you are effectively making 4 attacks. And the fact that here at level 11, it is only the first time on your turn that it hits, it applies your Hunter's Mark. And it deals extra damage equal to the bonus damage of that spell, right? So you can now deal extra damage with Hunter's Mark on one of your beast companions. So I'm hopeful that at 17, where Hunter's Mark grants advantage, but it's hard to say. It says, in addition, the first time each turn it hits a creature. Oh no, the first time it hits a creature under the effect of your Hunter's Mark spell, the beast deals extra force damage equal to the bonus damage of the spell. So it's not like it's benefiting from the effect of your Hunter's Mark. It just gets to deal the extra damage. So again, an extra d6 force damage on one hit or a d10 at level 20. If it just benefited from the effect of Hunter's Mark at level 11, that would be great because that would also mean that it would get advantage on attack rolls against creatures you marked when you hit level 17 or whatever. That would be a cool change. And then again, at 15th level, you get share spells. When you cast a spell targeting yourself, you also affect your primal companion if it's within 30 feet of you. Remember, this is a spell that targets yourself. So if you're healing yourself or something like that, this gets applied. I believe paladins get this automatically with their Find Steed from the level they have Find Steed to cast it. Share spells, just confirming, share spells in the 2014 version is exactly the same as the this version. Is the share spells is no different. It's exactly the same as the 2014 version. All right. So let's continue on.
Ranger. This came out of Tasha's. This was a really, really super fun one because eventually in your roaming, you might have gone some.
No, your beast would not get healed if another player heals you. Share spells is only when you cast a spell targeting yourself does it also affect the beast companion. So another thing that I did in one of my different versions of my homebrew of the Ranger was gave the Ranger evasion because I feel like they're, the monk and the rogue have evasion. To me, it feels like the Ranger should have evasion as well. And then I also had the Beastmaster at a point have their animal companion also benefit from evasion. Because I thought that was a good idea to help keep them in the fight longer. Because, like, again, the amount of times that I've been in a game, usually with newer players who have an animal companion, somebody hits a fireball on the party, and then the animal companion dies because the fireball damage is so high, and their animal companion usually doesn't have that many hit points, and now their entire subclass is gone. because they got hit with a fireball. So giving them like evasion, which is a thing we used to do in older editions. Excuse me. At certain higher levels, animal companions would just get evasion. So I appreciate that. But anyway, let's keep going. Tasha's Cauldron, Fey Wanderer.
Some background radiation from the Feywild, or been under its influence, or maybe that's where you in fact come from.
Yeah, the Fey Wanderer is, along with the Gloom Stalker, these two have wandered into the player's handbook to bring the sort of mirror world feeling of the Shadowfell and the Feywild, because those are the planes of existence that we've associated these two subclasses with. And so if you think of the Beastmaster and the Hunter being associated with the material plane, the Fey Wanderer is associated with the Feywild, and the Gloom Stalker with the Shadowfell. And so those two subclasses, the Fey Ranger and the shadowy one, they are, in many ways, the more magical rangers of the four provided in this book.
Perfect.
With then the Hunter being the least magical of the four. Now, the Fey Wanderer, it's going to be a fun friend to revisit for anyone who played the Fey Wanderer from Tasha's Cauldron. And what you're going to see here is the features that you loved in the class, but now integrated into the new Ranger, benefiting from the new spells that are here. In a way, the Fey Wanderer wandered into this book along with some of the spells in Tasha's Cauldron, including Summon Fey, which was something it had in Tasha's Cauldron, and thankfully, because Summon Fey is now in the player's handbook, the Fey Wanderer in the player's handbook can continue to enjoy the ability at higher level of summoning a Fey creature to fight beside the Fey Wanderer. Before you get there, you not only have extra spells that you have always prepared, you can also deal extra psychic damage with some of your strikes as you channel the magic of the Feywild. You also can beguile people with your otherworldly glamour, and ultimately, because we can never resist when it's a Fey-themed subclass, we end up giving you Misty Step so that you can teleport. And we also, along the way, we help guard your mind against being charmed or frightened. So the whole package means if you choose this subclass, will be drenched through and through with Fey magic and be a wonderful companion to, and here I'll do it, I'll refer to the Warlock, a wonderful companion to a Warlock who has the Archfey patron.
Yeah.
And the two of you can teleport around to your heart's content.
Perfection.
Yes.
So, it's basically untouched, more or less, from the Tasha's Cauldron version. Can we look at how Dreadful Strikes almost is as strong as your Capstone? When you hit a creature with a weapon, you can deal an extra d4 psychic damage to that target. You can take that damage only once per turn, and then at a level 11, it jumps up to a d6. This is very powerful, especially in comparison. So, like, you can stack this with Hunter's Mark, but this is just an always-on feature that you have. You have these extra spells, which they mentioned. You have Otherworldly Glamour, which give you some bonus to charisma checks. You get Beguiling Twist, advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened, and then when a creature within 120 feet of you succeeds on a saving throw against being charmed or frightened, you can force them to make a saving throw equal to your wisdom save. I think this is all basically the same. Then you can make them be this. And you get Fey reinforcements here at 11. You can cast Summon Fey. You can do this. It doesn't count against your number of spells known, and you can cast it without material component. You can also cast it once without a spell slot and regain the ability to do so when you cast a long rest. But look at this. Whenever you start casting the spell, you can modify it so it doesn't require concentration, and then it cuts the casting time down to a minute. Now, normally it has a concentration of an hour. So right here, Fey Wanderer has a thing where we've tweaked their spell casting to say, hey, this version lasts less amount of time, but it doesn't require concentration. You could do that for Hunter's Mark, right? You can cast Hunter's Mark, proficiency bonus, wisdom modifier times per long day. Maybe you do cut the concentration or the casting time down to a minute, but it doesn't require concentration, or not the casting time, the duration to a minute, but it doesn't require concentration. That's a great idea. I think it's not that big of a deal to let it stay the way it was, but this is an option that you have where you could choose to just follow suit with something you've already done and just make it less duration, but non-concentration, if you're that worried about it sticking around for however long. I feel like the fact that Rangers get freebie castings of Hunter's Mark at level 1, you're probably never going to cast it with spell slots unless you're really in a situation where you need to track something that immensely that you think it's going to get away and you're not going to finish the fight on it, where you need to like be able to know where it is for 24 hours. But more often than not, you're probably just casting Hunter's Mark at first level for the purposes of just getting the extra damage. This is a nice little adjustment to it. You could just do something similar to this. And again, this isn't unheard of for other subclass features as well, where you can cast the spell, you get it known, you get to cast it once for free, and then you can choose to cast a special version of it that doesn't require concentration, that has a less duration. We saw this with the Illusion Wizard on the video from last night. The Illusion Wizard can cast in Summon Beast or Summon Fey or whatever it is, and they can choose to cast an illusory version of that that doesn't require concentration, but it cuts the creature's hit points in half. There are so many instances now where we're seeing these special subclass version or special version of casting a certain type of spell that allows you to tweak it in some way, lessen the duration, increase the duration, lessen the hit points, whatever it is, to then remove concentration from it. Having an option like this in a similar fashion for Hunter's Mark just feels like it was such a missed opportunity to get there. But it is what it is. Sorry. Let's get back to the video. We'll talk about maybe the Hunter next.
Fey Chef's Kiss.
Yeah.
The sparkly trickster feeling of the Fey Wanderer is in stark contrast to the Gloom Stalker, who instead is not only channeling the magic of the Shadowfell, but also...
Which is, by and far, in my opinion, still the strongest Ranger subclass. If you've played Baldur's Gate 3, you know how powerful the Gloom Stalker is. There is a version of this that was introduced in Unearthed Arcana 6, so we're going to see how different this is from that version.
Just the shadows of the deep places of the earth, because you can also think of this being a ranger associated with the Underdark. And this subclass originally appeared in Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Yeah, and I've always loved this. Just the core concept of if you rely on your dark vision, you're invisible to them.
Yes.
Terrifying. You're the thing that the knight is afraid of. It's such a wonderful theme for a subclass. It's just chilling.
Well, and we've made it so that as you are hunting those creatures of the darkness, you're going to be even better at it.
Yeah.
One of the things we did right away in the subclass in your level 3 Dread Ambusher feature is we made it so that your extra damage is no longer locked to the first round of combat.
Yeah,
we wanted you to be able to enjoy being a Gloom Stalker throughout a battle, if you so choose, and not essentially, well, I was a Gloom Stalker on round 1, and then for the rest of the time I was a generic Ranger. But now we've made it so that you will be able to use your Dreadful Strike, also psychic damage, because I introduced the Gloom Stalker as, in a way, the foil to the Fey Wanderer.
Yeah.
And just as the Feywild and the Shadowfell are almost sort of opposites of each other, but they often both have to do with the mind and the emotions.
Yeah.
It's interesting that both of these subclasses, their extra damage is psychic damage.
And the Gloom Stalker does a significant amount of psychic damage every turn.
Well, but a limited number of times per day.
Yes.
It's not endless.
But it's bursty. It's a good amount of damage. It's healthy.
They like their Fey
how much damage
sibling
it is?
also have a list of spells that they always have prepared. They have their Umbral Sight, which gives them dark vision or improves their dark vision if they already have it. As you mentioned, other creatures that rely on dark vision to see in the dark can't see the Gloom Stalker in the dark.
Yeah.
Again, terrifying.
They're great at initiative.
Yes, they are. They are like their friends. The assassin and the barbarian are going to be more likely to go earlier in the battle than others.
The whole concept of this is the ambusher, this is the hunter and the knight, this is in the spell list reflects all that as well. I mean, it's unusual to see like the ranger with disguise self, for example.
It does make it seem like this is a better hunter than the hunter.
You are very much one with the shadows and illusion.
They also, like their sibling, the Fey Wanderer, they end up having various mental defenses, and then also they're going to start being even more terrifying at level 11 with their Stalker's Flurry, because their psychic damage goes up. And so that,
even more.
Yeah, so that bursty damage bursts even more. And also they can start exuding mass fear
all around them.
all around them. And they also can teleport once you get up to level 15, teleport out of harm's way when they are attacked. So all of
Let's take a look at Unearthed Arcana 6, because a lot of this sounds the same, right? So here are the spells. I think these are exactly the same ones from Xanathar's. Dread Ambusher, at the start of your turn, you're going to get an increase in movement speed. The start of your first turn. So that is going to, that little looks like that boost in your movement speed is going to be limited to just the first turn of combat. But they changed, I think he said Dreadful Strike. Here it's called Frighten. But basically, once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack roll, you can deal an extra d8 psychic damage and force them to make a wisdom save or be frightened. This is, again, here listed wisdom modifier times per long rest. Instead of just giving you an extra attack, they're giving you just extra damage when you hit. Again, it is when you hit, so you can wait to save this and potentially until you crit to deal an extra 2d8 psychic damage. Now, they did say something that they were like, it's juicy damage. I'm imagining this might have changed from the final version to be... Did they talk about it at all in the article here? It doesn't really mention it. Doesn't look like. Just checking to see. Gloom Stalker. No. Okay. It doesn't really mention the extra damage a few times per day. It doesn't talk about the specific number. But a D8 doesn't sound like juicy damage to me, so it sounds like they might have tweaked that number. Here's the bonus to initiative. Again, adding your wisdom to your initiative roll. That's pretty standard. We've seen that. Umbral Sight looks like sounds like that's pretty much unchanged. Increase your dark vision, get it to 60 feet or increase it. And again, you are invisible to creatures that rely solely on dark vision. I've always liked this ability. I always thought that was very cool. They talked about mental defenses. Iron Mind here, right, gives you proficiency in wisdom saving throws. If you already have it, you get intelligence or charisma saving throws. I love abilities that give you extra saving throws, which is why I do feel like base rangers should just get constitution saving throws as a thing, like at a certain level, because you've weathered, time outside. They mentioned Stalker's Fury here, or Flurry. You can make another attack with the same weapon against a different creature that is within 5 feet of the original target. That's great. That's very similar to one of the Hunter abilities. And then Mass Fear. Each creature within 10 feet of a target must make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened. You can cause one of these effects when you use this ability, Frighten, or now Dreadful Strikes. And then again, Shadowy Dodge is when a creature makes an attack roll against you, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage and then teleport up to 30 feet. I don't know if that is still the same, but it does sound like you can still get this 30-foot teleport to get out of the way, which is nice. All right, let's hear what they did to the Hunter.
this combined means they are really terrifying, resilient hunters in the night.
And there's so many different ways to flavor this one in particular too, because this could be the Van Helsing who is hunting vampires, or this can be a ranger who solely lives in cities or in the Underdark. There's so many ways to theme it.
Yeah.
I love this ranger.
It is, in many ways, the Gloom Stalker is the sort of gothic ranger.
Yeah, perfect.
Somebody brought it up in chat. I think it's Dragon Drake, and I agree. It's unfortunate that you'd have to give up. You have to give up other concentration spells to use 4 of your different base class features, because 4 of your base class features are tied to Hunter's Mark, which means you can either use 4 of your class features tied to this one specific spell or cast any other concentration spell.
I like gothy things.
Also, you're probably gonna, people want to have the concept of casting summon spells, summon animals or beasts or whatever as a ranger, because you're not giving them an animal companion unless you're playing the Beastmaster. So if you want to summon a creature outside of the summon Fey option of the Fey Wanderer, you can't do so without also giving up Hunter's Mark, because they're both concentration typically, which is one of the nice things that the Fey Wanderer has, where you could have Hunter's Mark up and then also have a limited time summon, which is definitely nice because, again, that's not usually an option you have, but you are giving up several class features in favor of that.
No. Okay, now that brings us to the Hunter Ranger. This is the low magic ranger.
This is, in many ways, sort of the subclass that is the baseline.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we took the version of the Hunter that was in 2014, took the best elements of it, and sort of remixed the whole subclass. So it, too, like the Beastmaster, is really close to just being a brand new subclass.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Part of that is you get a brand new feature at level 3 called Hunter's Lore. And this allows you that while a creature is marked by your Hunter's Mark, to know whether that creature has any immunities, resistances, or vulnerabilities. And if that creature does, you know what they are.
Oh, perfect.
This is definitely, we've talked about this, like learning, because we used to have those abilities that were like, you can learn their hits, their strength score, or their wisdom score. And having it basically just be immunities, resistances, vulnerabilities is huge. That's much more useful in a combat scenario. Again, this is another third level ability that is tied purely to your Hunter's Mark. So meaning you do need, we've tied another subclass, we've tied a subclass to a first level spell slot in this instance, and that casting it gives you an ability, which does, again, seem situational at best. It's also further forcing you into using Hunter's Mark. Whereas I feel like just learning this, kind of similar to how the champ or the battle master has it, where they just kind of learn things, would be stronger than tying it to creatures that are affected by your Hunter's Mark.
So you now are really good at hunting because you know, we shouldn't use fire on this particular creature, or we should use radiance on this creature. So this right away was a fun feature for us to create to help the hunter just be a better hunter. Then you get to the Hunter's Prey feature, and here you have a choice, just as the hunter used to have a choice in this feature. But the choices, we basically whittled, in each of the choice points in the subclass, we whittled the choices down to the best ones. In the 2014 version, at each of the choice points, there was always basically a suboptimal choice. And so what we've done is we've narrowed it to the best choices so that whatever you choose,
Well, that's subjective, but let's see.
it's a solid choice. And then we went one step beyond that. We've now made it so that you can change your choice whenever you finish a short or long rest. This makes these features far more tactical.
Okay, being allowed to change your like hunter style thing on a short or long rest is nice because then you're not locked in. You might find out you like one better than the other. So that's definitely a nice little benefit there.
Useful because then you can sort of steer your effectiveness toward what you think you face in the day or the hours ahead. We do this shtick again at level 7 in defensive tactics. You have a choice, and then you can revisit your choice whenever you finish a short or long rest. And you'll see familiar friends here in the features and Escape the Horde and multi-attack defense. At level 11, the
Okay, hang on. We'll come back to that.
Hunter now also lets you, when you have Hunter's Mark on a creature, and you deal damage to them, you can also deal that spell's extra damage to a different creature within 30 feet of the first creature.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's essentially your Hunter's Mark starts splashing damage on other people. We did this because the Hunter has always had this, when you looked at the choices that the subclass offered, it has always had this element of, I'm going to deal more damage to this single target, or I'm going to be really effective at fighting an entire group.
Yeah.
We continue to have those themes inside the subclass.
Yeah, Horde Breaker is fantastic. I just love that.
But now with Superior Hunter's Prey, this new feature speaks to both themes because you can now deal a lot of damage to one target and throw some damage on somebody else.
Perfect.
And then at level 15, you can take a reaction to give yourself resistance to damage when you take damage, and then that resistance lasts until the end of your current turn. So this is just a chance for you to sort of grit your teeth through the damage that you're taking to enhance your survivability.
Yeah.
Because we want the hunter to, whether the hunter is leaning more in a ranged attack direction or in a melee direction, to have really high resilience as they embark on their hunts.
This is a good ranger for this.
All right, so we noticed some things that they said. Let's go ahead and take a look here. This was UA 6. You had Colossus Slayer, Horde Breaker, and Retaliator at level 3. These are basically unchanged, right? Colossus Slayer, if they don't have full hit points, you deal an extra d8 damage to them. Horde Breaker, you can make a weapon attack with the same weapon against a different creature within 5 feet. And Retaliator was if a creature attacks you, you can use a reaction to make a weapon attack against them. We don't know if those are all coming through. Hunter's Lore, they did keep the same again with Hunter's Mark. Defensive tactics. Now, he only mentioned Escape the Horde and multi-attack defense. These options here in Unearthed Arcana 6 are all better than all of those. So here at level 7 in the Unearthed Arcana, you could choose Evasion, which is fantastic, Uncanny Dodge, which is also great, and Hunter's Leap. If you can see if an enemy you can see enters a space within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to move up to half your movement speed away without provoking attacks of opportunity. All very good defensive abilities. At level 11, they gave you Superior Hunter's Prey, which was pick a different option from this list. And then at 15, Superior Hunter's Defense, pick a different one of this list, which again, being a ranger, which is what I mentioned, I thought that ranger should have evasion as a base feature. Having something like evasion and uncanny dodge or evasion and hunter's leap would be great to have those at 15th level. They only mentioned here that they only had familiar options like escape the horde and multi-attack defense. Escape the horde is opportunity attacks are made at you with disadvantage. Again, hunter's leap, arguably just better in a lot of ways. And then multi-attack defense, which is you get a +4 bonus to AC to all subsequent attacks. Now, we also don't know for a fact, unless it says in this article, whether or not those have changed. Let's see. However, you can choose these sections, short or long rest. My new favorite change is the Hunter's Lore feature. Okay, it doesn't really tell us one way or another. I was seeing if this article had some more information for us. No. Okay. Sometimes this article gives away some information that's pretty useful to you. It doesn't really here. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So again, these options, it's not listed there. Multi-attack defense in previous version was that +4. That could be the same. That could be different. We're also assuming that escape the horde is probably the same as well. And now they said at level 11, you got superior hunter's prey, which was when you hit a creature that's marked by your hunter's mark. Again, has to be marked by your hunter's mark. It can bounce off to deal extra damage to a creature within 30 feet of you. However, it's only the extra damage, which is a d6 until you hit level 20. It does a d10 to one other creature within 30 feet of the target that you hit. Now, it doesn't continue to bounce. It's not like a ricochet shot that bing, 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 bing bounces. That would be kind of cool if it could do like a number of bounces equal to like your proficiency bonus or something. That's a lot, but like it's also only a d6 damage until level 20 when it becomes a d10. Bouncing that multiple times is pretty cool. I kind of like that. That would be pretty neat if it bounced numbers. It would hit a number of targets within 30 feet, almost like a very, very mini kind of like chain lightning where it like bing, bing, bing between a couple of targets. That'd be kind of cool. Destiny fans out there giving me hard new exotic Kavasta vibes, which I'm a big fan of. And then now at level 15, which again, here in the Unearthed Arcana, gave you a different one of these, which are all very powerful options. Now they said it's just, as a reaction, grant yourself resistance to damage when you take damage, use your reaction to grant yourself resistance to that source of damage until the end of your current turn. So previously, we could get something like Evasion, which would be a constant always on, or Hunter's Leap, which would let us move away. We now get a reaction to reduce an instance of damage that we took by half, which is similar to Uncanny Dodge. However, this does, in its benefit, does maintain until the end of your current turn, I think is what they said. Till the end of the current turn. So, like, I guess if multiple enemies hit you, you will have the benefit of retaining that resistance until the end of the current turn. So if there's multi-attacks or things involved in there, that's definitely... It's the current turn, though. So like if this happens on one enemy's turn, you'll get resistance to those. So it's not like you're getting resistance till the start of your next turn, so that it's like, okay, I get resistance because of this for the whole time. I would argue that these versions here with the defensive tactics are stronger in every way. Also, kind of annoying, we're losing what was one of the best abilities, was multi-attack at level 11 in the volley and whirlwind attack. These were really strong abilities for the 2014 Ranger that I was never really played a Hunter Ranger, but these are very strong abilities here. I really like these. These let you do a lot more attacks. They're also Redana's in Baldur's Gate, but that's besides the point. They don't have anything like that anymore. The best thing you have is Horde Breaker, which lets you make one additional attack. They also, not that Giant Killer was a huge one that people took, You know, we have Horde Breaker. They used to have this one here that was called Retaliator, which was very similar to Giant Killer. They removed that one entirely. Steel Will, I don't think anybody took. I also feel like this basically should have just been immunity to Frighten, because, you know, at level 10, Paladin Aura is going to give you immunity to Frighten anyway. So, sounds like a subclass. Like, it sounds like it might be even worse than the version we're looking at here, because we've once again tied different subclass options here to Hunter's Mark. We've tied Hunter's Lore, which is fine, because that's kind of like a freebie throwaway. You know, when you cast Hunter's Mark, you learn the resistances of those creatures. But then we tied your level 11 ability to Hunter's Mark as well, so that when you deal damage, it bounces. I think, like I said, I think if you were to keep the bounce and increase the number of bounces, it's only a D6, right? It's not like it's a ton of damage until it becomes a D10 at level 20. So yeah, if it was like it bounces over to pick a number of targets within 30 feet of your initial target equal to your proficiency bonus, there's no lore reason for why this happens either. But like, it does damage equal to the bonus damage to those to like a number of targets equal to your proficiency bonus within 30 feet. It's a D6 damage. It would be nice too to do that, because then it would further set up Colossus Slayer, right? Because Colossus Slayer deals extra damage to people that aren't at their maximum hit points. So having sort of like a bouncing shot that'll hit and deal damage to other targets, to just, even if it just chips off one singular hit point, they will not be at their maximum hit points anymore. So that would allow you to then further set up Colossus Slayer. That would be a small little tweak that I would like. But overall, I am not a fan of I haven't really been a fan of the Ranger since 2014. We tied 4 class features to a level 1 spell slot. I feel like we're missing out on a lot of stuff. They do not get level 1 expertise anymore, Ernie. They get 1 expertise at level 2, and then 2 additional expertise at some point later on down the line. We're not sure exactly what level. Seems like it's post 7 though, or post 6, I think. Just based on the order in which they kind of gave us the information. So it looks like you do get 1 expertise at level, I think it was at level 2. And then 2 languages. So, oh, did they list that in the article here? Let's see. Oh, here, we can just, I keep forgetting we have this article. Let's take a look. All right, so here we have level 1, spellcasting. You can now swap out 1 spell on a long rest. Favorite enemy, which is Hunter's Mark, is always prepared, and you can cast Hunter's Mark. It says this number increases when you level up. We don't know how many. It says twice per long rest. You can, is it proficiency bonus times per long rest? It doesn't really say. Weapon mastery. Natural Explorer is just totally removed. You get Deft Explorer at 2, gain expertise in 1 skill and learn 2 languages. Fighting Style, which now has other options. We get the subclasses at 3. Primal Awareness has been removed. Roving at level 6 now. 10-foot movement speed, and also gain a climb and a swim speed. No more land stride. 2 at expertise at level 9. At level 10, you can use an action to get some temporary hit points. Does it tell us how many? It doesn't. You get some temporary hit points. And then again, the benefit that I do really like is reduce exhaustion by 1 level when taking a short rest. And that's also not limited to like once per long rest. You can reduce your exhaustion level by taking a short rest. So you could, in theory, take multiple short rests to reduce your exhaustion level almost entirely, which is pretty cool. Relentless Hunter at 13. Again, damage doesn't break concentration on Hunter's Mark. Nature's Veil is 11. You become invisible until the end of your next turn, which is nice. And then again, it is tied to your wisdom modifier instead of your proficiency bonus. Odd that we're going back to modifiers as opposed to proficiency bonus. But yeah, like I said, the number of times you can do that is equal to your wisdom modifier. So again, if you have a 20 wisdom, you could possibly stay invisible for 6 consecutive turns. Precise Hunter at 17 is advantage on creatures marked by Hunter's Mark. Blind sight out to 30 feet with feral senses, epic boon at 19, and then yes, Hunter's Mark now deals an additional D10 instead of a D6 is your level 20 ability. And honestly, folks, I will take the changes to Wild Shape, and I will take the changes to Divine Smite, and I will take them willingly because it could have been a lot worse. Could have been making a D6, a D10 as your level 20 ability. So yeah, Druids, Paladins out there, rejoice. Rejoice, live life, embrace your new changes, because believe me, as we've seen, they could have been so much worse. Also, Hex exists, which is essentially Hunter's Mark. But even like the Great Old One Warlock, I think it was, gets Hex, but Hex also now the Great Old One could also give disadvantage on saving throws with Hex. Yeah. How Monk is that like the UA? Monk, I believe, from what we've heard, is pretty much the same. And like honestly, we're seeing things like again, Monk gets 3 attacks with Flurry of Blows at level 11. That's 5 attacks for a monk. They can turn it all to force damage if they want to. A lot of really cool stuff. We haven't gotten to the monk yet, but that'll be coming, I think, next week. So we'll get the full information. Yeah, Great Old One Warlock at level 10. Hex gives disadvantage on saves, which is just crazy strong. But also means that Hex is, really good as well. Yeah, it's let's just pull up. Do we have the Warlock one? Take a look at the Warlock. Well, we didn't really go over the fact that they have Contract Patron at level 9 for the Warlock, where they can just cast Contact Other Plane to communicate with their patron. It automatically succeeds at level 9. That's a pretty cool ability. We like that. Well, so what'd you say? So just a theory. They want a reason to make their Drizzt something to something book. So let's break Ranger at advantage. Drizzt started taking levels of monk, honestly. In the last novel I read, he was training at the Monastery of the Yellow Rose to become a monk. So he's already not being a ranger. He's training. He took at least there was a whole point that when he ditched his armor, how fast he could move in one of the more recent novels that I read, because he needed to make like extremely quick overland travel. So he trained with at the Monastery of the Yellow Rose to learn how to be a monk, to further like self-discipline because of all of like the mental issues he was having. So he was training to do that so he could move faster and run quicker overland. Driz saw where the meta was going. Well, honestly, again, the thing that people don't understand is Drizzt is like 10 levels of fighter. So like he's more fighter than he is ranger. Even if you were to look back at like when they gave him official stat blocks, when they gave him official stat blocks in 3.5, he was 10 levels of fighter, a couple levels of ranger, and 1 level of barbarian in the stat blocks from 3.5 in the Forgotten Realms like campaign book that he was in. He was mostly fighter because when he trained in Menzoberranzan under like House de Werden, when he was training, he was a fighter, a 2-weapon fighter when his dad taught him how to fight. And then when he left Menzoberranzan and spent his like year or so traveling the Underdark and kind of almost became feral, is when he took a level of barbarian, because that was like the hunter and is basically like a primal instinct where the hunter would take over and he would just like kill things without having like thoughts about it, kind of going into a rage. And it wasn't until he met Montolio de Brucci that he started to train as a ranger once he made it to the surface. And then he started to train as a ranger. And then honestly, like I said, now he's a monk. If you look back to there was an Out of the Abyss episode of Acquisitions Incorporated where they were going into the Underdark. This was years ago, and they met Drizzt in the Underdark. And Chris Perkins released the stat block that he used for Drizzt in that that version of the game, and Drizzt was a 10th level fighter. He also had the benefit of all of his magical items, right? Like he had both of his scimitars, he had a cloak, he had the whistle that let him summon the unicorn, and all that kind of stuff. But he was a 10th level fighter. So WotC, in multiple aspects, has embraced that Drizzt is more a 2-weapon fighter than he is a ranger. Sorry, I'm placing an order for lunch here. All right, there we go. Yeah. I like the concept that the designers at WotC have a friend who loves Rangers that they all hate, so they keep messing with him. That that's more honestly, if they came out and admitted that, I would back off all my hate for the Ranger. If it was just like yeah, we hate, Edwin. Edwin over here loves the Rangers and loves Ranger class, and Edwin is just a dick, and we can't stand Edwin, so we just nerfed the Ranger every chance we get to just screw with Edwin. And I'd be like, you know what? I respect that level of petty. I take back everything I said. I would love that. That would be fantastic. I know that's not the case, but that would be wild. The more this comes out, the more I think it should just be a martial with expertise that some subclasses get magic. I would not Dragoon. I would not start with the first book released because the first book released was the 4th book in the series. You want to start with the is it the Dark Elf trilogy? What the hell is the name of that book? You want to start where he's in the Underdark before he leaves, because the order in which they released is not the chronological order of the books. Hang on, I'll tell you in a second here. You want to start with Homeland. Yeah, so the Crystal Shard was the first book released in 1988. So you're going to want to start with Homeland, which is, I think, the Dark Elf trilogy. So it goes Homeland, Exile, Sojourn, then the Crystal Shard. That'll get you all the way. Because basically, if you start with the Crystal Shard, Drizzt is just kind of there. You don't learn about any of the history he had about Menzoberranzan, about his family, about who's coming after him at later points. So you're going to want to start with Homeland first and then make your way there. So yeah, Homeland, Exile, Sojourn, then the Crystal Shard, and continue on from there. Yeah, it is currently 39 books, I believe, from 1988 to just last year. No, you're right. Drizzt was not intended to be the hero. Wolfgar was intended to be the hero, and then they made that change, and Drizzt became the hero. So that's why they kind of had to go back and tell his story, because you kind of get Wolfgar's whole background in Crystal Shard, and then when they changed it to make Drizzt the hero, they had to go back and tell Drizzt's story. So yeah. There are some spots there are some books that you could probably skip. There's a lot of funky stuff that goes on. I think all the Neverwinter stuff, basically most of the 4th edition stuff, I didn't really like. But you'll meet some amazing characters. So I think basically everything after I think it's the 2 Swords, basically everything after the 1,000 Arrows tribe incident. There's like 3 books that I didn't particularly like, which I think were like the Orc King, the Pirate King, and the Ghost King. I didn't really love those books. And then it goes to Gauntlgrim, and then that's a pretty good stuff, but I did not like most of the Neverwinter stuff until like I guess it was probably Neverwinter, Karen's Claw, and the last Threshold I didn't particularly love. And then you get to the companions, and then it kind of almost is like a reset. And then I like it from then on. I will also tell you, they have had basically if you like audiobooks, Victor Bavine has been the audiobook narrator for every one of these books. So he is the same narrator for the past 20, 30, 50 years or so. So he's definitely worth listening to. He does a great job. I love his voice, the timbre and the tone in which he provides to the books are great. And you don't have any of that annoyance of bouncing around between narrators or narrating it a different way. I really appreciate his take on it. So but yeah. So Thibbledorf Puent, 100%, one of my absolute favorite characters. I love Puent. He's one of the best out there. Thousand Orcs, great book. Yeah, and the books released relatively close to one another. There were gaps at some points, right, between book releases, but it wasn't like Roy Dotrice narrating the Game of Thrones books where 20 years passed between book releases, so he forgot how he voiced and did accents for certain characters, forgot how he called certain characters different names. That was my most one of the most annoying things about the Game of Thrones audiobooks was, again, Roy Dotrice had 20 years between some of those book releases. So he forgot that he called her Caitlin Stark, and then he called her Catelyn Stark, and he was back and forth on different ones, or called her Catelyn, then called her Caitlin. Arya had this accent, now she has this accent. Stuff like that. That gets annoying. That really takes me out of the immersion of the book when I'm used to things being done a certain way. Oh my god, Harkle Harple, fantastic. The Harple wizards in general, amazing. Love those characters. More people should use them in their games. Just go to Long Saddle, have fun with the Harple wizards and all their kooky weird nonsense, whether it be creating frog horses or turning into werewolves. Just phenomenal. Phenomenal characters. Love them. Yes, Cries and Winds of Winter, absolutely. I know. And unfortunately, Roy Dotrice, who was the narrator for all of those books, passed away, so he'll never get to finish narrating those books. We don't have him anymore as an option. Which sucks. But yeah. So, Harple Artificer, very cool. Very cool. I did reference them in our Vecna Eve of Ruin campaign. I've referenced the Harples a few times because I just thought it was funny. I think my character is canonically from Longsaddle, so that kind of makes sense. Or has like a house in Longsaddle. But yeah, anyway, this has been was this been the longest video? How long is this? 2 hours? Yeah, this might be the longest one of these videos because I had a lot of passion and a lot of things to say. And I am sorry that it got pretty negative. I know I've said that I basically have attempted to try to stay very positive throughout this. Like, there's been changes, and I feel like I've done a relatively good job of staying positive where I think there was a reason for all of the changes made. Like I said, I'm hurt by the Paladin changes as a Paladin player, but I'm also going to give it a shot. Like, I'm going to try playing Paladin with smites as a spell and the limited number of smites and stuff like that. And honestly, what I predict will happen is I won't just be able to totally eliminate a fight in a turn by just novaing, novaing down an enemy by double smiting and just racking damage. I imagine, right? That's what I think will happen ultimately. I think I'll be more in line with everything else. Same thing with like the druid changes to the way wild shape is. Yeah, it definitely is a nerf in some aspects, but I think it ultimately will feel good in the long run. And again, as many of us said, how many people that are a non-moon druid are wild shaping? You might do it earlier, and it's usually for recon, so the lack of the hit points isn't like a huge deal breaker for me. And unfortunately, once again, I still have no interest in playing a ranger in 5th edition. whether it's 2014 or 2024, it just doesn't appeal to me. I like the threads of stuff that they were teasing at, but we didn't really pull out. I like this concept of this ranger trying to be this wild person, this rover, this outdoorsy type, which is fine. And I think you really could have pulled that thread of like the short rest master, right? Doing all this cool stuff. Like the most unique and interesting feature that the entire ranger has is that being able to reduce a level of exhaustion on a short rest. That is the most interesting and most unique feature that the ranger has. And I absolutely love that. And I've tried to call out where I thought there were positive changes. They did do some good things for the ranger. Adding weapon mastery, huge. Level 1 spells, fantastic. Expanding the fighting style options to include everything, great. Giving them multiple access to expertise, also really good. Having Hunter's Mark be able to be cast without a spell slot, great. Having it be concentration, horrible. The temporary hit points, ability to grant temporary hit points, bonus movement speed, climb and swim speed. These are great things. There is the teasing of a well-designed class built there of this cool outdoorsy type. And it is almost there. It is like a little bit of it's like a LaCroix. A LaCroix of the Ranger is what we have here. But I need something a little more substantial, right? I don't need a whisper of a flavor of a woodsy, outdoorsy type. I need something robust here. Something a little stronger. And I do not feel like we're there. I think again, something like the coolest feature being that short rest loss of a level of exhaustion is great, but also it's specific on you having levels of exhaustion. And if you don't do things to come across from that ability is useless. So like I said, maybe you do something like make it when you take a short rest, you gain temporary hit points. Additionally, if you have a level of exhaustion, you reduce that level by 1. Now you're at least giving you something that's more actively useful. Doing the things where you change Hunter's Mark to be non-concentration or different aspects like that. Again, assuming you want to even use Hunter's Mark, it's still a spell. It's still counterspellable, right? Your whole class feature, 4 different class features, is based on something that can be counterspelled. Not that enemies are necessarily going to do that, but realistically, you have all these things tied to one spell. Does Hunter's Mark have hang on. Let's just find out, right? Because this would be wild if this is the case. Hang on. If we look at the 2014 version of Hunter's Mark. So a 2014 version of Hunter's Mark, which I'm assuming transfers and carries through, is a verbal component spell. So 4 of your class features don't work in silence. So if you're in a silence situation, you can't use 4 level 20 Ranger in a silence bubble cannot access 4 of their class features. And several subclasses can't access their class features because it's blocked by silence. Again, somebody mentioned Tales of the Valiant doing a very similar thing with their Mystic Mark. It's triggered on the attack. When you make an attack roll, you can, do this, right? That's kind of nice. Upon making an attack, you can mark a target, and again, it's non-concentration. So that would be a crazy little change that you could make to the Hunter's Mark here. So you could just remove it. The original concept behind favored enemy was you chose a specific enemy type, right? This is the original concept, right? Pick a creature type that you don't like, that you want to be your favorite enemy, and you can deal more damage to them because you've trained against that. But they didn't really give you that option too much with the 2014 version. So I always thought add your proficiency bonus damage or your wisdom modifier in damage to your favorite enemy, right? So you're just dealing a little bit of extra guaranteed incremental damage that will slightly scale over time to your favorite enemy. And then what I had at level 20 is that all enemies are considered your favorite enemy, so you would just add that damage across the board. I also added the opportunity to change your favorite enemy on a short or long rest as you leveled up over time, different things like that. But that was just it lets you do consistent damage, and it still wasn't even that great compared to some of the other things that are that much stronger. Granted, there were other role play aspects to favorite enemy, But yeah, the fact that a level 2 spell can block 4 of your class features is kind of nutty. Yes, exactly the same LaCroix. I think you have to account for spell usage when comparing to Monk, who does not get spells. Yeah, but monks do get a lot of cool new things now, especially with like the way they change things to like, yeah, you can disengage as a bonus action for free, but if you spend a discipline point, you can now disengage and dodge at the same time or whatever it is. I really thought that since they stopped UA testing for Ranger earlier than expected, they decided to completely do it. It was going to be a lot better. Woof. Sorry to say. Dashing 3 times in a row gives you exhaustion. You could race ahead of the party. Do not worry about exhaustion. Yeah, that's true. Right? There's definitely some things you could do, but like the levels of exhaustion, especially like it's how frequently you're going to encounter it. I will home grow Hunter's Mark, Nummy non-concentration, and no verbal component. Yeah, right. If it had no components, it also couldn't be counterspelled as well. I never expected the TOV Ranger to be so much better than the 2024 one. Yeah, that's true. How often is silence cast? Agreed. Right. It depends. I've definitely cast silence against my players. If you enter into an area like a trapped part of a dungeon where it's a silence room, now the party can't talk to each other because it's in silence. Like there's different ways you can encounter it. But I agree. You bring up a good point. But a simple spell can counter 4 of your class features. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I agree. The paladins can't smite in silence. That's also true. I plan on using TOV and homebrew for all my games going forward, but paladins still have other things. Like it's not like your lay on hands are blocked by silence, or your auras are blocked by silence. So there's definitely benefits there. A level 4 ranger could stop a level 20 ranger. Yeah, you're not wrong. Another failure on this design is it doesn't regain uses of Hunter's Mark during short rest, which means Rangers doesn't have a reason to take short rest until 10th level, at which point, other than to regain hit points. That's true, right? We wanted to talk about, yeah, that is definitely true. The short rest mechanic doesn't come online till 10th level. So that's part to consider that as well. These fans are right up next to a piece of sound foam, and I'm like, that's not actually doing me any favors by blowing it right out into a piece of foam. I think Baldur's Gate 3 reminded a lot of DMs that the silence spell existed. Yeah, agreed. I also really like the way they handled the Beastmaster in Baldur's Gate. They just gave them their own turn and initiative, and then also every time you got a class feature for the animal companion in Baldur's Gate, they just got boosted stats. And they even unlocked like special abilities for those companions. Like the bear got honeyed paws, which lets them disarm an enemy and stuff like that. Like that was just a really cool factor. It was kind of like a passive thing that the animal companions got. I also really like the updates for like the base ranger, right? Where you could get find familiar or you could take heavy armor and all these other kind of things. Again, some of those work better because it's a video game. But I do think Baldur's Gate 3, I enjoy playing a ranger in Baldur's Gate 3 more than I ever would in sitting at the tabletop. Now, I mean, we talked about being able to homebrew stuff, and we came up with some pretty good homebrew options in this stream alone, ways we could tweak Hunter's Mark to make Hunter's Mark better. If you want to keep Hunter's Mark as your class feature, which again seems like a not great design, but if you want to do the minimal amount of tweaks to the class, keeping Hunter's Mark as a class feature in multiple instances, there's a couple of tweaks we can make to make it a little bit more powerful, a little bit more useful across the board. That's true. But and then maybe a couple tweaks again, like the tireless feat, giving you more stuff. And I do think there's an opportunity to add other cool outdoorsy things. it'd be cool to give them like a thing we talked about. I said I think they should have evasion. It'd be cool to give them like a concept of evasion. Like we used to have this in some instances. It was usually called metal, but like METTLE. But it's basically evasion, but for Constitution saving throws, and that would be a really cool thing to give a ranger at like level 7. So, if you make a Constitution saving throw to avoid damage, you take half damage on a failed success and no damage on a success. That would be a really cool thing to give a ranger. To really give them that outdoorsy benefit, that would be a really cool thing. I think that would be a nice little tweak. I think in older editions it used to be, it was because you basically had evasion was dexterity and metal was basically for fortitude and wisdom saving throws. I think making it constitution and wisdom would be a little rough. It's a little very powerful, but boosting the constitution one. So I think that would be a pretty cool little tweak, right? Like you get advantage on constitution saving throws and, or not advantage, but like the take half damage on a failed constitution saving throw. That would be really cool. I might add that into my homebrew version. So like I said, when my embargo lifts officially on this, on the 1st of August, I will have a lot of videos coming out covering a variety of different aspects of this book, shortly followed by a series of tweaks, like what would I do to update the old subclasses that didn't make it into the 2014 or the 2024 books, and then I will have a fixing ranger video. Yeah, I do like the climb speed and swim speed and the boost to just speed in general. So you're going to have a 40-foot climb speed, swim speed, and walking speed, assuming you have no other benefits to boost your movement speed. That's really, really strong. To be fair, monks get proficiency in all saving throws. Evasions for constitution and wisdom isn't that much better. Yeah, it's fair. They did seem to make a lot more things tied to wisdom modifiers for the ranger, which is odd because I figured they would have just tied things mostly to proficiency bonus, which seemed to be a big shift they were making across the board, as anything that was tied to a modifier was then shifted to proficiency bonus to allow it to be more consistent and less swingy. But then to see them for some things go back to modifiers is kind of odd to me. Yeah, you also, Siva, you bring up a chance thing here, right? They have them blind sense to 30 feet at level 18, but a fighter at level 1 could have blind sight out to 10 feet. So could a ranger with a level 2 fighting style take blind sight out to 10 feet. And then it doesn't really matter because, like, then if you had it at 10, then when you get to 18, it would just go to 30. It wouldn't, like, increase. But again, I also feel like if you wanted to just be a really good archer, a champion fighter, a battle master fighter, just better overall. Remember, because they get the opportunity to change some of the weapon masteries on the weapons that they're using. So a longbow wielding fighter is better in a lot of ways than a ranger. I mean, there are other options that rangers can do, but like, don't forget that you get Indomitable as a fighter. You now get the tactical shift and the tactical maneuvers and all these other things that that fighters now get that give them more battlefield movement, tactical abilities, which kind of could make you a better. I mean, you could, in theory, take the same numbers and do like a ranger and a fighter and side by side it and move up and down and kind of see, like maybe pick. I guess you got to go to at least till 13 when you don't break concentration on your hunter's mark, and just like compare them side by side and like see the difference and how this works. That one might be a video we make at some point, maybe after everything's released, kind of do a side by side. Because what I always said back in the day, and I'll still probably stand by it, is that a ranger or a fighter rogue is a better ranger than the ranger, especially when you had the concept of the scout rogue from, I think it was Xanathar's Guide, which was the naturey rogue. The scout rogue had some really cool abilities like boosted survival and nature checks and stuff like that, and the ability, like the skirmish ability to like move away when an enemy ends within certain feet of you. That plus like some levels in Battle Master Fighter could combine to do most of the things that the Ranger could do, if not more. And with these new boosted versions of Rogue and Ranger, especially the fact that, like, was it level 7? Rogue gets reliable talent. Like, you could do so many cool things and have no issues. So it's wild what you could do with a fighter rogue combo now. And it would be justice. You just take a nature based background and you're good to go. So anyone able to see what the dislikes are at the Ranger reveal video? YouTube's hidden dislikes, I'm pretty sure, so you can't actually tell. They can't switch the mastery anymore, but they can choose like of a list of 3 different masteries that they can apply to the weapons that they couldn't. That, like, I think it's like Vex, Push, or Topple or something. Vex, Push, or Sap might be. You can apply those 3 weapon mastery properties now to any weapon you use, whether or not that's what they have. It's not like changing them to something else. Owl Knight, I did that to my party. I played as a Oath of the Ancients paladin with the Outlander background in my first ever 5e game. And it was 5 sessions in before the fighter at her table realized that I was playing a paladin and not a ranger, because I just played up the roleplay aspects of nature. So, okay, I guess they do have. I thought dislikes were hidden, but maybe not. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I think I'm going to bring this to an end because my kids just got home. They went to the library and they just brought home lunch. So I'm going to go eat that lunch and try to decompress from this. So thank you all for coming in and hanging out. Sorry it got so negative at points, but I have very strong feelings about this. And I think there's definitely work that can be done on our end as fans with little bits of homebrew that can kind of try to bring this more in line power-wise. It just really comes down to, what do we want this class to be? So anyway, I thank you all so much for watching. I'll be back at some point on Monday, although I may now be on day shifts. That'll be another 12-hour day shifts for the upcoming weather that's coming in tomorrow night. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching.